Welcome back. Well, the former Liberian leader Charles Taylor is to be tried in The Hague. It's the culmination of a lengthy campaign for him to be brought before an international court. But who is Charles Taylor and how did he come to rule Liberia? Lucy Ashton has more.
Charles Taylor, Liberian warlord, preacher, president and fugitive, a descendant of freed African-American slaves. He's the man who started the Liberian Civil War.
I hate to see them getting killed.
And yet the Civil War did just that, killing 200,000 and driving 1 million from their homes. Taylor went on to win a landslide victory in the 1997 elections. The ballot was fair, though fear was perhaps a chief motivator. In Taylor, voters saw a chance of peace, a strong man able to defeat the country's other warlords. But despite his pristine suits, his methods were brutal. As president, Taylor allegedly turned the country into an illegal trading machine, dealing weapons for diamonds and aiding rebellions across West Africa, one of which was in Sierra Leone. 6 years into his rule, Taylor was losing his grip. Rebels controlled 2/3 of Liberia, and the UN wanted him for war crimes. Rebels entered the capital, and Taylor went into exile. He saw it as a temporary setback.
God willing, I will be back. God bless you.
He fled to Nigeria, where still a wanted man, he was turned over to the UN in 2006. Fearing a local trial in Sierra Leone might trigger violence across the region, Taylor was transferred to The Hague.
I do not recognize the jurisdiction of this court. I think that this is an attempt to continue to divide and rule the people of Liberia and Sierra Leone, and so most definitely I'm not guilty.
Guilty or not, a more immediate question now faces the court. Does it have enough funding to bring Taylor to justice?
Civilian women and girls.
Well, let's rejoin our guests now from The Hague in the Netherlands, Elise Kepler, and from London, Tim Lambourne. Tim Lambourne, let me start with you, because all too often there's been no justice for victims of human rights violations in Africa. What sort of message does this trial send out to the world at large?
Well, to the world at large, all the trials that take place of former heads of state who have been allegedly responsible for genocide and for wars in various countries which they may have invaded or they may have ruled over, sends out a message that this cannot be done with impunity at the beginning of the 21st century. So. Does it have any effect? I don't believe that it does have any effect, although I do believe that it is right and it should happen. One of the problems is that we do have exactly what Taylor was referring to in that clip that was in your last package, which basically said he didn't recognize the jurisdiction of the court, nor did Mr. Milosevic when he was tried. And it always looks to some degree to be like the West imposing its levels and precepts of justice on the rest of the world. Now, you could say that's only right and fair and that justice will be done, but there are a lot of people who live in these countries, and particularly in West Africa, which is an incredibly diverse and multicultural place, a place where there are as many differing opinions as there are as there are people. And so whether this actually really has an impact upon other rulers who might be there at the moment or might be on their way up, I'm doubtful.
Well, let's put that very question to Elise Kepler at The Hague, because Tim Lambourne seems to think it won't have much effect. I mean, if this trial is successful, would this mean the end of impunity for African leaders who, in the past, I suppose, have gotten away with alleged atrocities?
From our perspective, Taylor's trial puts would-be perpetrators on notice. And in fact, to see someone of Taylor's standing as a former president in the dock answering charges on the most serious crimes, this is someone associated with murder and mayhem across West Africa. That is a powerful signal. And having recently been in northern Uganda, where there are peace talks going on, I've seen for myself that the trial of Charles Taylor is known and does send a signal. The rebel leaders there who have been indicted by the International Criminal Court have cited the situation of Charles Taylor and his trial. So obviously these trials do resonate certainly in other parts of Africa and hopefully around the world, to send a powerful signal that no one is above the law and these kinds of crimes will not be tolerated.
Tim Lambourne, some critics accuse these international trials of meting out victors' justice. How do you see it?
Well, there's not really a victor's justice in this particular case because nobody beat Mr. Charles Taylor. He was deposed by a rebellion within his country, and then there was a free and fair election in which Ellen Sirleaf Johnson came to power. In fact, he's indicted for crimes of assisting the RUF in their fight in Sierra Leone. Now, just to pick up on a point of your interviewee from The Hague, if we look at the LRA, which is the Lord's Resistance Army leaders in northern Uganda, yes, that is absolutely true, but they are not the rulers of countries. Let's take that further south and say, is Mr. Mugabe worried at all by the fact that Charles Taylor is being tried in The Hague? I don't believe that Mr. Mugabe thinks for one moment that he's ever going to end up in The Hague under trial. And so I think the thesis is a little thin.
Well, let's put that to Elise Kepler. I mean, do these trials have any effect?
From our perspective, they absolutely do, and it's not necessarily an immediate effect. It's a gradual evolution, and it's something that contributes, these kinds of trials for the most serious crimes contributes to building respect for the rule of law and a sense that indeed these kinds of crimes cannot be committed, and perhaps not tomorrow or the next day, but this is something that over time we believe really changes how people perceive these kinds of crimes and the fact that justice will be done. And one other point that I wanted to return to is the whole issue of whether or not this is an issue of the West imposing itself on Africa. And I think it's very important to note that this is a mixed national international court. The Special Court for Sierra Leone is a Sierra Leonean international court, and there are Sierra Leonean judges along with other African judges sitting in the chambers and Sierra Leonean staff throughout this court. And in fact, the creation of the court was requested by the Sierra Leonean government, and it is a UN-backed tribunal following that request.
I wanted to get a final thought from Tim Lambourne, if I may. Tim Lambourne, do you think this trial will go some way, perhaps, in helping Liberia reconcile its war-torn past?
I would sincerely hope that it would. I do remember, of course, that you've got the Abuja trials that are going on for the atrocities that happened during the Rwandan genocide. It's doubtful that they actually had much of an impact, except that what they did was that they forced the international community to think, hang on a second, these things don't really work if you leave them happening in Africa. Let's take them back to a place where the Sierra Leonean justice, which your interviewees just talked about, can be channeled through a very much more westernized, into a westernized scenario so that things can happen. I do believe it will have an effect, and I think that she is absolutely right that this is a gradual approach, and it is right that Charles Taylor is tried for these crimes. I'm just skeptical that it will help the people on the ground who are missing hands and arms and legs at this time.
All right, we have to leave it there. Tim Lambourne in London and Elise Kepler at The Hague. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and your suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. That's insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team here, goodbye for now.